we have a panel of innovative Scottish companies involved in the world of transportation, electrification in transportation, but in a series of different ways. So it is my pleasure to introduce Mark Constable, the Head of Business Development for Trojan Energy, and Terry Yoell, the co-founder of Flock Mobility, and Mark Ravilious, the founding director of Intra-Drive. So the way that this panel is going to work, each of our speakers will take a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, to talk about themselves, their business, their products and services, after which we'll have some time for some Q&A once everyone's explain what their business is and what they're doing. So I think we might mix things up a little bit than what was planned in the agenda there. Terry, would you mind jumping in first and telling us a little bit more about your business?
Sure, thanks, Dan. Let me try and share my screen. Okay, so I think before we dive into the actual presentation itself, I thought it'd be quite a good idea just to give you a bit of background on and look at our origins, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to understand how sharing and electric mobility are inextricably linked, really. We actually started off with a congestion detection technology that we were building for a train operator for GTR at the time. And we were looking at real-time disruption on platforms and on the trains, on the carriages. And having built this product and the fact that we were receiving this data, they came back to us and actually said to us, well, look, it's all very well, but the issue for us at the moment is also to be able to mitigate the disruption. And so we started looking at this disruption mitigation side of things. And one of the obvious answers was to try and match or group the individuals who were disrupted, and to try to offer them sort of onward shared rides. And so what we looked at doing was to potentially partner with existing ride-hailing companies like Uber, and try to offer people shared rides to that original destination. And without even knowing it, to be honest, we had already entered the sort of mobility as a service paradigm, because we were now trying to essentially offer these seamless journeys, and it almost sort of fell into the last mile sort of arena. And naturally, what happened with the last mile was that the commute takes up a large percentage of that. And so we started focusing in on the commute more and approaching corporates and looking at how we could potentially offer their employees that last mile between, or first mile for that matter, but the last mile between the office and the rail stations. And then subsequently, having those conversations with the corporate, we started to understand that they were making the move towards electric mobility, and they were obviously trying to meet these sustainability targets, and we could be a part of that, because essentially, sharing and electric mobility are, I think, inextricably linked. And that pretty much brings us to the actual presentation itself, which is what we are now, and that is Flock Mobility. We position ourselves as a transport as a service company, and essentially what that means is that we just offer a comprehensive basket of goods for the corporates from a transport perspective. We offer the electric fleet. We offer the charging infrastructure that goes alongside that. We offer the professional drivers, as I'll discuss later on. And then sitting on top of all of that is our shared mobility platform. And the shared mobility platform itself looks to try and maximize the utilization of the electric fleet. And we do this by offering guests and employees shared transport options. At the core of what we do, we're essentially trying to offer the same convenience from our shared mobility platform or from a shared corporate fleet as employees actually currently gain from their private car. We started off with these pilots offering corporates the commute product, and that's essentially a managed commute service for the workforce. It comprises a sort of dynamic timetable where we're able to offer employees shared electric rides to or from work, and we look to group them based on the time that they would like to arrive at work or leave work, and also where they live. And it was all very well, and it was going really well. But what was coming out of the pilots was that the employees weren't getting the same convenience that they currently did from their private car. And so we started to look at this in more detail, and they still wanted to go to gym at lunchtime. They still wanted to go to the shops. They were trying to drop off their kids, or they weren't willing to use the service because they might have an emergency with their children and they needed access to a vehicle. And so what we looked to do was to try and offer potentially additional products or additional shared products on top of this original commute product outside of those commute hours. And so that's where the Combi Plus option came in. And we started to offer this self-drive option where people could actually book by the minute or by the hour, or even potentially by the weekend, and take these electric vehicles off-site and actually really start to maximize that utilization of these vehicles. And what we also started to do was to look at the mobility budget as a whole. And what we realized was that the corporates were spending an inordinate amount on taxi fares, and potentially to or from the station as well. And we had this professional driver who was offering this commute service. So why not bundle that in and be able to offer the corporate guests rides to or from the station or wherever it was they might be coming to or from. And we could save them that money as well. And that budget, we were looking at this from the mobility budget overall, and this potential saving for the corporate. I mean, in addition to this, what's quite useful with this product is that the employees are able to contribute towards the overall cost of the service, even though it might be subsidized. And so the overall cost of that mobility service does come down for the corporate. And at the same time, we've got these great sustainability credentials as well. So yeah, I mean, that to be honest is the core product. And yeah, I look forward to answering any questions later on. Over to you, Dan.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Terry. I'll just share my screen again. Great. It was interesting when Terry was first explaining this to me. It really sunk in when I realized that when he described the scenario where the idea of having a chauffeur come pick you up from home every morning was quite an impressive experience for anyone. So if that's the kind of service offering my company can provide, that's pretty fantastic, as long as it's done for a good price, of course. Okay, so next up, I will ask Mark Constable to take over and tell us a little bit more about what Trojan Energy is up to. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Dan. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Let me just share my screen now. Okay, so Trojan Energy Limited was formed in Scotland to help everyone benefit from the energy transition, helping the 30% of drivers who don't have a dedicated parking space, as well as everybody else who should have access to an uncluttered urban landscape. The heart of the Trojan technology is our charge point, sunk into the pavement and fitted flat and flush to the surface. Ooh, there we go. So, hi everybody. I'm Mark Constable. I'm Head of Business Development at Trojan Energy. I'd like to start by thanking Urban Foresight for the chance to be part of this great event. They've done some great work in Scotland and also some great work in some places that aren't Scotland. The Dundee City Council Rapid Hub Partnership is one such pioneering example. I learned a bit about that in my time. Go grab some juice there if you ever get the chance. So for my part, I've been around e-mobility now for over a decade. And at some point, I've worked to deliver infrastructure in every segment: public, private, on-street, off-street, depot, driveway, rapid, fast and slow. And we're going to need all of that if road transport is to play its role in reaching net zero. One size is not going to fit all, but we at Trojan believe we've got the strongest solution for our segment. It's only my third week at the company, and I'm already certain that our technology and proposition answers more questions and meets more of the challenges for the residential on-street charging conundrum than any other solution available. So how does the Trojan system work? How do you get charge out of what looks like a disc on the pavement? A driver simply inserts what we call the lance into the charge point, pushing it straight down to engage the docking mechanism. The driver then raises the handle to lock the lance in place, then plug in the car as normal with no separate activation needed. To disengage, unlock the lance via an app or a key fob, depress the handle and remove it, leaving a flat and flush charge point ready for another user and not cluttering up the street in the meantime. Excuse me. The Trojan system uses a 68 kilovolt amp supply to power 15 AC charge points at a time, and each charge point can be powered up to 22 kilowatts each. And you probably realise that 15 times 22 is 330 kilowatts. And on only a 68 kilowatt supply, the system has a smart charging capability to effectively allocate power to each charge point based on user requirements and the presence of a vehicle. There are good reasons to have a setup like this at the moment, because it keeps connection costs right down and also leaves more power on the local distribution network, which is often constrained anyway. And supply power can always be increased later on if it's required and it's possible. The lance itself has a three-phase 32 amp per phase cable with a Type 2 connector for full 22 kilowatt capability. A little bit technical now, but with the advent of 800 volt charging architecture, more cars will be able to charge on this speed at AC. Up till now, 400 volts has been the norm, but with cars like the Porsche Taycan and the Audi e-tron GT bringing 800 volt architecture to the market at the top end, and Hyundai and Kia with their new Ioniq 5 and EV6 vehicles bringing that architecture to the mass market in very, very short amount of time, this architecture will become much more common. And we think that 22 kilowatt charging will become much more common. A word about the lance. The handle is designed like that. You see it comes up quite a way, but it's to ensure the system complies with the minimum height requirement of 800 millimeters for permanent street furniture. Although it's not permanent street furniture, we effectively assume that it is. And those rules are there to make sure that any street furniture is visible and negotiable for any street users. The lighting on the charge point and the lance is configurable based on some local requirements. Some planners want brightness and want the charge points to be visible from a long way away, and some local authorities want the points to be very, very discreet. So the lighting is configurable. The system has been fully weather and impact tested. The company founders have a background in undersea oil and gas production, so they know a thing or two about sealing and managing water in electrical installations and harsh environments. And just on that, Trojan is a Scottish company. The founders all come from the Aberdeen area, as where nearly all the employees live around the area as well. They were engineering leads from the oil and gas industry and effectively saw the light and knew that they wanted to work in a more sustainable and a more technologically sustainable and carbon sustainable future for all of us. So when we deploy the charge points, we're looking to install effectively 15 at a time from a single supply. We think we'll issue round about 4 lances per charge point, so that there are effectively 60 drivers who can use the system in their local area. Early on, there may not be 60 within kind of walking distance, but we've got some trials starting in the Brent and Camden boroughs in London, where we'll be able to test out all of these usage assumptions, all of the utilization, all of the user experience, and get some feedback from all of the users that have been signed up to those trials. And they start within a couple of months. We're partway through installing the infrastructure. So, what's the biggest problem with on-street charging? It's availability. EV drivers want dedicated parking spaces, and local authorities are reluctant to provide them a volume. It might be achievable at kind of one space per street, but what happens when a quarter of the cars are EVs? What about half of them? What about 3/4? How do you make parking availability fair at the same time as charging availability as we go through this big transition over the next 10 to 15 years? The Trojan system has both passive and active features to help manage this for all stakeholders. The passive feature is simply the number of adjacent points. Having 15 points in a row on the street naturally increases availability without the cost and clutter of having 15 traditional posts with one supply per post. So it's 15 times more likely for a bay to be free at any given time. But secondly, in the active technology, Trojan has de-icer. Along with every system, Trojan will install sensors that can be mounted on existing furniture or on new dedicated poles that will monitor charge point availability in real time. Local drivers can get an app notification when a space becomes free if they flag that they need a charge. And once they've got their charge, they can be incentivized to move, perhaps via a discount off their next charge, so that they can move on and leave the bay free for the next person. Insight on any given system can be collected and analysed in detail to gauge not just demand in terms of number of drivers and number of transactions, but how much charging these drivers do. And so each individual system can have a usage profile built up, and we can answer questions like, is another system needed very, very nearby if there's high demand? Or if there's low demand, should this system be flagged to drivers, Trojan drivers, slightly further away? Again, all the systems are fully configurable based on local conditions and requirements. So EV growth is unstoppable, and the time for action is here. On-street charging is especially topical even outside the EV bubble. Only yesterday, Jeremy Bryant had a segment on this subject on his Radio 2 lunchtime show, if anyone heard it. It contained a lot of stories of drivers trailing cables across pavements and even across roads in some cases. I think we can all agree that that can't take hold of our urban environment. It's bad for people with mobility or visual impairments, and it's bad for everyone else too. At Trojan, we believe we've got the answer, and if you'll forgive me, it's an answer born and bred in Scotland. So we're keen to speak to local authorities and other interested parties across the country who are interested in solving the most difficult part of the EV charging puzzle for residents in such a way that doesn't clutter up public space. So if that's you, we can't wait to hear from you. Thanks ever so much for watching.
Thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate it. It's great to see that the company's moved on from just hardware into more the software and de-icing side of things. It's fantastic progress. Okay, we'll get to some questions, as I mentioned before, after we finish with our next presenter. So please keep them coming in the Q&A box, and we'll jump on those in the next few minutes. But handing over to another Mark, Mark Ravilious from Intra-Drive. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, hi everyone. Okay, so I'm the founder, I'm Mark Ravilious, founder of Intra-Drive Limited. Started the company in 2017, and we are developing innovative powertrain technology for electric bikes. So we've got a prototype unit here. This is the gearbox and motor combined, which will fit into the middle of your electric bike. So I'm going to tell you a bit about why you might want that, what the benefits are, and the sort of journey of the company, I guess. And that's, so I'm going to sort of split the talk into two, I guess. The second half, I'm going to go a bit off piste and get into some sort of broader discussion about sustainability and yeah, maybe a bit challenging, I don't know, but I hope it's going to be thought-provoking. So yeah, I'm just going to bring up a presentation on the product first. Let's get that going. Okay. Right, so hopefully you can see a picture there of motor unit. So, sorry, Dan, could you just confirm if that's come up okay?
Yep, that's all good.
Okay, good. So, yeah, basically blinking at mine, but okay. So the products. Why would you want this on a bike? So with a traditional electric bike, we have a lot of extra load being put through the drivetrain, through the chain, and through the gearing system, and that's because you know, the motor's kicking out about 2 or 3 times as much power as a human would normally produce, and that puts a lot more load on those components on the drivetrain. So basically, it means that for people who are using an electric bike regularly, they end up needing to replace the chain and the sprockets and the derailleur gearing system quite regularly. And there's a real kind of cost and hassle to that. It's especially obviously significant for heavy use cases like cargo bikes or commuting people who are cycling every day. So our solution is an all-in-one integrated product. It may look outwardly very similar to a Bosch or Shimano motor unit, but it actually includes an 8-speed gearbox and a motor together in one unit. So it's completely different to the existing technology that's out there. So yeah, that allows us to use a single sprocket at the rear with an extra wide heavy duty chain or even a belt drive to take drive to the rear wheel. And there's basically, at the end of it all, there is substantial improvement in durability and reduced maintenance. So we're really going after kind of like making bikes far more accessible to and far more user friendly, really. So yeah, a quick slide on the market. So global e-bike market is already huge and predicted to continue to grow even more rapidly. In Germany, last year were over, or almost 2 million electric bikes, were sold. The Netherlands, over 500,000, with an average price point of over 2,000 euros. And yeah, one sort of statistic that I thought was interesting, in Europe, last year, there were 1.4 million electric cars registered, but there were 3.3 million electric bikes sold. So twice as many electric bikes are being sold each year as electric cars in Europe. Bit of an overview of the structure of the bike industry. So it's a bit like automotive. It's kind of a tier structure. You have a lot of bike brands. This is just a handful of them. There's a lot more than this at the sort of the top of the tree, I suppose. And they are supplied by component manufacturers who make the you know, all of the components, the gearing system, the motor, batteries, you know, handlebars, wheels, and so on. When it comes to motors or drivetrain components, really, there's really only a handful of companies that dominate that market space and supply the hundreds of bike brands. So that's just to give you a bit of an understanding of that. So yeah, where we're at now, we've got a working demonstrator unit fitted to a bike. So that's the one I just showed you earlier. Inside that unit, at the top right here, we've got an image showing some of the gears that are in there. So yeah, it's an 8-speed gearbox, and it combines. It has electronic shifting as well integrated in. So that means you have no cables coming in and out of the unit. It's all about making it sort of extra durable, so that there's nothing to break or need replacing. At the bottom right there, we've got a picture of our in-house test rig, where we can do sort of accelerated lifetime testing. So we're just sort of starting that phase now. We're kind of fairly far through prototyping and moving on to looking to start production in 2022, next year. Couple of quotes just to round off the product presentation part of it. So yeah, a lot of market interest from some of the big brands and a lot of the smaller bike brands as well. Yeah, there's certain, I mean, the bike industry in general is talking about moving towards gearboxes for electric bikes. along with some other technologies. But there's a lot of innovation going on in the drivetrain space for electric bikes, because there is a recognition that conventional derailleur gearing system is not really suitable, or has problems when you put as much load through it as you do on an electric bike. So we're sort of already ahead of that curve. We started this process, developing this product 5 years ago, and are pretty close to market ready. Okay, so let me just stop that slide share. Figure out how to. Sorry. Stop share. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So switching over to sustainability more broadly. I mean, I know that was one of the sort of some of the questions that Dan sent as a sort of prompts were around sustainability. So I thought I'd pick up on that, and yeah, because alongside being an engineer and founder of the business, I'm also an environmentalist and occasional climate change activist. So I thought I'd bring a bit of that to this discussion as well. And that's really because for me, that if I look at the predictions of how the world will be by the end of the century, when temperatures are likely to be maybe 4 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels, I find that pretty terrifying. And so I wanted to kind of, sort of touch on some of that, because I think it's easy to forget what's at stake and just see low carbon technology as purely an emerging trend or a new market opportunity, and to use terms like climate emergency without really recognizing it as the emergency that it is. So yeah, I wanted to kind of sort of maybe center this discussion around using the adage that I'm sure everyone will have heard, reduce, reuse, recycle, which is a hierarchy. So reduce is, the best choice, and recycle should be considered to be the last option, if nothing else is possible. And so yeah, it seems to me that like everybody accepts that recycling is important now, and that's pretty central and normal. And more people are talking about a circular economy, which you could consider to be analogous to reusing, perhaps. But when it comes to reducing, it seems like it's quite rare to hear businesses or governments encouraging people to use less, to buy less stuff, or to talk about reducing material throughput, or even perhaps slightly more radically reducing economic growth. So I thought I'd tackle this slightly challenging topic. I'm going to start with a few sort of facts, I guess. So 2/3 of Scotland's emissions come from materials we consume. So that's the number from Zero Waste Scotland. So CO2 emissions are pretty closely tied to economic growth. If you look at graphs of CO2 emissions compared to economic activity in the world, the only time there's really been any significant dip in CO2 emissions was during the 2008 crisis, and then it sort of shot back up again once the economy picked up. So, and I think this is actually fairly widely recognized now. It's just not talked about. So, I'm going to go sort of throw in a couple of quotes from a recent report, the Dasgupta report, which was an independent review of on the economics of biodiversity, and it was commissioned by HM Treasury. So it concluded that we have collectively failed to engage with nature sustainably to the extent that our demands far exceed our capacity to supply us with goods and services that we all rely on. It also said our unsustainable engagement with nature is endangering the prosperity of current and future generations, and that at the heart of this problem lies deep-rooted, widespread institutional failure. So pretty heavy stuff, and just a reminder, that's from a UK government commissioned report written by economists. So I guess the question is, what can we do about that? And so I guess what I thought is coming back to reduce, reuse, recycle, I thought it might be interesting to sort of explore that, ask some questions about it. So to me, it seems like reduce could also be applied in the sense of divestment. We might want to think about reducing investment into the things that we recognize are already damaging the planet. So yeah, really I sort of thought, okay, it's interesting to look at low carbon technology and investing in low carbon technology, but perhaps it makes more sense to reduce investment and support for industries which are already known to be causing climate and ecological collapse. So yeah, I'm going to skip ahead a bit because I'm probably running out of time. So I'm going to skip to the questions at the end. So I thought I'd just ask these a couple of questions. What part do you play in supporting industries who are driving climate and ecological emergency? Do you have money invested in fossil fuel companies which you could divest? Do you know what industries your pension fund is invested in? Do you have a bank which funds the climate collapse? And if the answer is Barclays or HSBC, then you probably do. So yeah, and all kind of quite heavy stuff. I thought I'd just switch for sort of to wrap it up, move to a more positive outlet, which is a vision of the future. So I like to imagine that we could live in a world where there are cities which are free of cars, where there is free public transport, where there are less flights thanks to frequent flyer taxes, and a thriving staycation holiday sector. We might have new economic models which put people and planet before profit. Major financial institutions who played a role in funding climate collapse would have divested and changed their policy thanks to pressure from customers and businesses. And products like Intra-Drive's powertrain unit would be built here in Scotland, built from recycled materials which are sourced locally, built in factories powered by 100% renewable electricity, and producing products that people really need, but not overproducing and not driving consumption. So yeah, I'd like to see an economy that's focused on growing rather than growing GDP. And yeah, I think another world is possible, and it's up to us to embrace that change, and it's not going to happen unless we do. So yeah, I want to finish with one sentence, which is a quote by David Attenborough when asked if net zero by 2025 was realistic or if 2050 was a better target. He responded saying that we cannot be radical enough when dealing with these issues. So yeah, thanks for listening. I hope this maybe raised a few thoughts. And yeah, and on the sort of asking for support side of things, really we're just looking for other companies who are thinking along similar lines, who we could sort of work with together. And on the supply chain side of things, we're looking for manufacturers of gears, CNC components, and so on. So if that's you, you're in Scotland, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Yeah, that was fantastic. I mean, I know from our previous discussions, if all the speakers want to come back in with their video and audio, we can kind of get into some of the questions and answers. And just a reminder to those in the audience that we don't seem to have any questions in the Q&A section just yet, but that is still open. So if you have any questions of any of the last three speakers, please put them in there. So Mark, it'd be good to just follow on from what you were just saying around the way you build this ethos and approach into your business. You mentioned that you're building a ruggedized device, and that's fairly core to your goals. That's something that you're trying to ensure the longevity of that. What type of, are there specific goals around that you're looking to achieve? Like, how much longer do you want this to last beyond the existing products that are out there? And there's the follow-on question more about how you're trying to stand up your business as well, with these factors in mind as well, but we'll get to that. Yeah,
thanks, Dan. Typically most electric bike drivetrains probably last, if a bike's used regularly, sort of every day as a everyday means of transport, like a primary mode of transport, you'd be looking to replace the drivetrain within a year on most bikes. And so we're looking to push that to at least 10 years, which is completely achievable for a gearbox-based solution, because you're protecting all of the the heavily loaded parts are inside the sealed casing. It's lubricated by oil, hardened steel components. You know, it's gearboxes can last a long time. So yeah, longevity is very much a core sort of philosophy behind the product. And we think, yeah, a tenfold increase in lifetime is possible.
It definitely flies in the face of most consumer approaches and investment motivations. So yeah, hopefully, so people in the audience that are thinking along the same lines and can potentially help out. I mean, this also impacts, I think, the business model that you're exploring as well, and the way you receive investment. I don't know if you wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of like exploring different ideas at the moment in terms of the business model. And up until now, the company's been funded by myself and some grant funding from Scottish Enterprise. So yeah, going forwards, kind of looking at different options. I mean, I'm quite interested in ideas like employee ownership and perhaps crowdfunding, sort of ways to grow the business without the pressure of the company being sold to a bigger company, and I suppose ending up driving consumerism, which is kind of, I suppose, what I'm trying to avoid. So yeah, kind of interested to hear from anyone who's kind of different business models that are perhaps less conventional or less widely used, and would be interested to discuss that with anybody who's got some experience in that space.
Great. So I'm getting into a few other questions that I had as well for the other panelists as well. I mean, I kind of had a throwaway one about why Scotland, but I realised that we have a wide range of different companies. But it would be great to touch on sort of I know Mark Constable Trojan, originated in Aberdeen.
Yep.
And you're just new to the company there. I mean, is there anything more you can share about the benefit of, or benefits that Trojan experienced being in Scotland and originating here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to. So the founders of the company, as I said, were engineering leaders from the oil and gas industry who kind of saw the light. I think that there's a fantastic supply chain in and around Aberdeen, obviously, for manufacturing and design and realization of high-tech technology, much of which is off the back of Aberdeen's long-standing position in the UK offshore oil industry. I am the only person who doesn't live within a half-hour drive of Aberdeen. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm from that London. But one of the reasons that I was attracted, as a new hire to the organisation, was the kind of the seriousness and the expertise that was effectively taken out of what you could have assumed up till then was an industry that created nothing but problems. Now, as it turns out, the expertise that some people have built up in that industry is helping to create answers to some of those things. So the founders are incredibly proud of their Scottish roots, and rightly so. We're looking to keep as much of the operation in and around Aberdeen as we can. A lot of the fabrication, a lot of the design, a lot of the assembly takes place in and around that area, and we've got a challenge to grow. We've got worldwide patents on all our technology. We're going to have to understand how we're going to kind of manufacture things at possible global scale. It'd be a good problem to have a little bit further down the line, but we've got to grow into productionizing the technology, and local partners are very, very key to enable us to do that.
Fantastic. Maybe Terry, have you got anything to sort of add to that? I know you've taken advantage of some of the funding opportunities locally, but are there any other upsides to being in Scotland? And I think some of your pilots are here as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the mobility industry itself. I mean, the original reason we came to Scotland was the MAS Scotland organisation, and they're probably one of the most progressive worldwide, actually. So from a mobility perspective, it is quite progressive, and also it's got a couple of unique sort of challenges with rural type MAS examples. And obviously, from a legislation perspective, the Scottish government are quite aggressive with their climate goals. Some of those relate specifically to transport and actually the reduction of the number of cars on the road. I think they've said 20% in 10 years. So, I think we could be quite a big part of that. And it would help us with this whole shared electric mobility side of things. So yeah, that's, and to be honest, also from a Scottish enterprise perspective, the possibilities in terms of funding were fantastic. So yeah, that's also part of the reason that we have taken up Scottish residents.
Fantastic. So we are running over time already, so we haven't been able to get too many questions in. But yeah, just for the presenters, Mark, and Terry, is maybe after this take a look through the chat, because I think there are specific questions that targeted at each of you. So maybe go through and respond to those as you can. I did want to finish off with one though, more around sort of the challenges and opportunities you're facing in the most immediate future, and this speaks to asking the audience, how can they help out, how can they possibly engage with you and help move your business forward. So Terry, maybe go first there.
Sure. Probably the biggest challenge that we've got is actually getting the large corporates to test and to pilot our technology at this stage. And so anyone who's able to provide any form of introductions to the big corporates within Scotland or outside, that would be fantastic. I mean, we've seen it from our current pilots that the minute the corporate takes up those pilots, they want to make it something that's more permanent. And we can make a real difference to their sustainability and to their commute strategy and that type of thing. So any introductions to big corporates would be much appreciated.
Great. Hopefully some of the audience will be able to help out and connect with you. Mark Constable, any requests or challenges?
No, I'm pretty all good, real good my end. Thank you. Sorry, I was just momentarily distracted because you told me to go into the chat and have a look at the question. So I was actually
sorry. Well, everyone else ignores me when I ask them to do things, so that's good to see.
All right. I won't make the mistake of listening to you next time around, Dan, in that case.
Fantastic. I know Mark Ravilious, you touched on a few of the things you were looking for. I don't know if there was anything else you had to add.
Yeah, no, I think I've probably covered it. I mean, the only other thing would be, engineers who are interested in recruitment. Basically, if anybody's interested in joining us on our journey to developing this product, then get in touch. And likewise, or another thing I suppose would be investors with a similar sort of ethos, who are not just looking for not primarily only interested in return on investment, but are sort of motivated to develop a product with longevity and so on. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Dan.